Hello guys, this is your friend. We are back with a new fanfic. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start a new fanfic. Hanabi heard a muffled yelp and pitched up in her bed. Scanning the darkness of her bedroom, she found the source of the sound, a figure crouching beneath her window. Cautiously watching the person, she withdrew a kunai she had hidden underneath her pillow. Aiming at the center of the person, she threw the kunai, and was shocked when the kunai hit the wall with a thud. She heard the soft click of the lock and looked toward the door to see the person standing there. Hanabi was about to scream for help, but a hand clamped over mouth, muffling it. Hanabi bit her tongue to wake herself up. Why in all that was good, that someone had to attack her when she was in deep slumber? Hanabi suddenly stilled, gathering her and focusing her chakra. The person who was holding her mouth pressed a kunai to her throat, and was about to slice her neck open when she released the chakra she'd gathered at her chakra points. The man was forced backward and the kunai fell out of his hand. Hanabi jumped off her bed, whilst activating her Byakugan. She backed herself into a corner of her room, that way she could see the two people who'd come in to assassinate her. Assassinate. Someone wanted her dead. With that thought in her head, she basked in the adrenaline rush and the instinct of self-preservation. With those two body mechanisms fueling her, she focused on her adversaries. She was going for the kill. The person who was by the door rushed towards her, kunai extended. Hanabi ducked under the ninja's outstretched arm, and elbowed him in his lower spine, which sent him stumbling forward. She charged towards the other one, aiming a strike at his torso. The person deflected it and barraged Hanabi with ruthless attacks, which she evaded with ease. She suddenly morphed into a crouching position and landed a few juken strikes at the person's thighs, which made him stumbled. Taking advantage of this, she rose up and kneed the person in the solar plexus. After that, she transmuted into a kata of painful strikes and kicks. It was a fighting style different than the traditional Hyuga taijutsu. This style allowed for more flexible moves and improvisation. She ended the kata with a flying roundhouse kick to the ninja's head, which sent him crashing into the lamp, semi-conscious. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted a kunai flying at her, and she merely her head to the side to dodge it. She turned around and faced the ninja who'd thrown it. He seemed ready to fight. He'd underestimated her speed, which was why she was able to land that hit on him in the first place. A mistake he wasn't likely to make again. At least he was able to recover while the other ninja was getting thrashed. Juken. Hanabi reverted back to her form of Hyuga-style fighting. She figured the person saw her in her other fighting style, and would have tried to figure out the basic mechanics of the style, thus being able to know how to avoid or evade her attacks. The person probably knew how to fight against a Hyuga, hence trying to assassinate her. But what the ninja probably didn't know was that the Hyuga fighting style of the main branch members were different than the branch family. Main family taijutsu was based on branch family taijutsu, but the main family members were allowed to customize it, making their own style of it. Thus each person in the main family had a similar yet different fighting style. Channeling chakra into her palms and feet, Hanabi charged at the other ninja. She feinted a roundhouse kick to his ribs, but the ninja didn't fall for it, and kept up his guard. It was just as she suspected. This person knew the concepts of branch family fighting. She sent a kick at his head, which the person caught. She released the chakra in her foot, and the ninja released his hold, clutching his hand in pain. With the help of her Byakugan, she targeted his vital organs. With an incredible burst of speed, she slithered around his punch, which left his torso open to attack. Hanabi took advantage of this and slammed her palms in his chests, releasing chakra as she did. The ninja stumbled back into a wall, to which Hanabi gleefully took advantage of and commenced her version of Hinata's 100 Palms of Fury. Hers became more vicious with each hit that landed. Her attacks were so forceful, and her chakra so sharp, that she was literally rupturing the ninja's back. She stopped at around 37, as the ninja was now limp and dying. The ninja slowly slid to the floor, painting a red mark on her pristine wall. Hanabi reined in her emotions, and lowered her fighting spirit. Maybe she overdid it. She crouched down in front of the ninja and asked, "Who sent you?" The ninja smiled at her, blood slowly spewing forth from his lips. "You really want to know?" The ninja asked, in a raspy voice. "Who sent you?" Hanabi asked, placing a palm over the ninja's heart. The ninja chuckled, a hideous sound. "A Hyuga sent me." Hanabi released the chakra she had channeled into her hand, effectively obliterating a section of the ninja's heart. She didn't have time for games, someone intended to kill her, and she wanted to find out whom. She watched the ninja gasp for breath as his lungs filled up with blood, suffocating him. It was a slow and painful death. When the ninja was dead and gone, she was about to close his eyes when she noticed something for the first time. This ninja had pupil-less eyes, similar to her own. Hanabi removed the headband with the hidden leaf's insignia on it from the ninja's forehead, and gasped. Sure enough, there was a caged bird seal there. She prevented the seal from activating with a quick jutsu she'd copied from an elder. The seal destroyed a Hyuga's body within 5 minutes of their death, which was why autopsies were rarely given in the Hyuga estate. The fact that her now dead assassinator was a Hyuga brought about huge complications she would have to deal with. It also gave her something to think about. It was highly unlikely Hinata was behind this, as she usually directly approached her. This meant that someone else was after her, someone from the council or the branch family. The only question was why. It wasn't until she heard a cough that she remembered the other ninja who'd come after her. Hanabi turned around to see the ninja crouching in the window sill, ready to escape. "Wait!" she exclaimed, racing towards the ninja, who, for obvious reasons, jumped out of the window. Damn, Hanabi thought, while grabbing a robe from off her bed. She hated giving chase to anything. She jumped out of the window while shrugging into her robe. The roof was cold underneath her bare feet. The ninja was only a few yards ahead of her, which meant that he was still injured. Otherwise, he'd have already teleported. "Stop!" she shouted, as she glided from rooftop to rooftop after the ninja. "Damn you!" She threw the kunai she had taken out of the wall when she was leaving her room at the ninja, who just dodged it. Hanabi kept shouting at the ninja to stop, thus waking up the clan as she chased the ninja. Lights and muffled voices were coming to life as she ran by the houses. They were nearing the entrance gate to the estate now. She doubted that she'd be able to catch the ninja, as she was losing her adrenaline rush. So, she used her Byakugan to memorize the ninja's chakra network. That'll have to suffice her for now. Hanabi stopped and landed right in front of the branch family. She watched as the guards at the main gate gave a feeble attempt to stop the ninja. Kissing her teeth, she made her way back to the main family residence via rooftop. "Repeat what you are trying to say again. I didn't quite get it," Hiyashi said, as he watched his angry daughter pace back and forth in his room. Hanabi turned angry eyes at her father. "Do you ever listen to anything I say?" she said, in a disapproving tone. "What part of someone just tried to assassinate me don't you understand?" Hiyashi sighed. It was after 4 in the morning, and quite frankly, he wasn't ready to get up yet. He was still in the throes of slumber. He had been sleeping peacefully when Hanabi had barged in his room, making a ruckus about someone trying to kill her. "Did you catch the person?" Hiyashi asked, rubbing his eyes in an attempt to wake himself up. It was too early in the morning to be bothered. Hanabi was ready to pull out all of Hiyashi's glorious hair strand by strand. This man was acting as if it wasn't a big matter. She took in a deep breath and reined in her temper. Then, in strained voice, said, "I killed one of them, and the other got away." Hanabi was somewhat happy to see her father's eyes widen when she mentioned she killed one of them. "I think it'd be better if you just come and see the scene for yourself," Hanabi stated, leaving the room. Hiyashi followed her down the hall to her room. A few servants were rising out of the quarters, inquiring about what happened, and if they needed to be available. Mameha was one of the people who woke up. She immediately followed Hiashi and Hanabi. Hanabi had to kick the door open, as one of the ninjas had locked it. She motioned them inside and closed the door behind her, to keep away the curious and the nosy. Good heavens! Mameha exclaimed when she saw the state of Hanabi's room. Bits and pieces of broken furniture was scattered about the room. There was a few kunai marks in the wall, where she was fighting with the dead ninja. There were a few blood drops on the window. On the wall by the door, there was a huge red mark, as if someone threw a bucket of red paint of the wall carelessly. And just underneath that mark, lay the dead ninja, who had been marinating in his own blood, and whatever else had leaked out of his body. Hiashi gathered his robes and crouched over the ninja to examine him. Hanabi watched as his eyes widen upon recognizing the ninja's features. This is a Hyuga. Hanabi finished for him. Someone from the branch family, to be exact. Mameha Ba-sama, do you know him? Mameha studied the body for a minute. She'd seen death occur too many times and ways to be shocked by this. There was something familiar about the body, she couldn't put her finger on it. She turned towards Hanabi, who was obviously shaken despite the calm facade she was wearing, and asked, "Did you kill him?" Hanabi nodded. "He was sent to assassinate me. There were two of them, but one of them got away. I don't think the other one was a Hyuga though, or if they were working together. I think they both were sent by different people and just happened to meet up here," Hanabi said, while sitting on her bed. "Assassinate? Who would try to kill you?" Mameha asked, completely baffled. "That's what I love to find out," Hanabi said dryly. "Then what about Miss Hinata? Did they try to assassinate her too?" Mameha asked, her face full of worry. She used Heibayakugan and looked into the room next door, to make sure that Hinata was fine. Sure enough, Hinata was sleeping safe and sound in her bed. "She's fine," Mameha announced, relieved. "That's against the rules, Mameha Ba-sama," Hiashi pointed out. No one was ever allowed to use their Byakugan to look into another person's room. Mameha gave him a look and asked, "Your point is?" "HMPHH, Hiashi grunted and moved over to inspect the window sill. Hanabi smirked. Mameha Ba-sama could do anything she damned please and no one could or would say anything to her about it. They wouldn't dare. Hanabi wanted to be like her when she grew old. No forced signs of entry, Hiashi thought. He surveyed the room. Obviously a fight took place here, but seeing that there was no forced sign of entry, they'd have to go with Hanabi's word. Which was going to be a problem when the inquest by the Hyuga Council, and the local investigative squad, takes place. All in all, upon first glance, this would be classified as a murder. He sighed. Leave it to Hanabi to give him gray hairs. "Well, what are you going to do?" Mameha asked, her voice brimming with excitement. She loved scandals, whether they be classy, or grimy. They added entertainment to her usual dull life. Hiashi turned to face them, his mind set. Mameha Ba-sama, contact the Civil Dispute Division of the Anbu, let them send an investigative team down here in the morning. Also get some trustworthy ninja from the main family to preserve the scene. And finally, get a Hyuga medic nin in here, to keep the body in its current state until the Anbu team arrives. As for you Hanabi, he turned toward his daughter. I suggest you clean yourself up, and stay on the estate, preferably in the house. Recall what you know so that when you face the council, later this morning you can tell them what happened in vivid detail. Mameha nodded and eagerly summoned two servants to carry out her instructions. Hanabi nodded. Hiashi surveyed the room again. Hanabi, I also suggest that you find someone to round up the people you roused during your chase. You'll need as much witnesses as possible. Hanabi stared at her father confused. Witnesses? Yes, witnesses, Hiashi grimly reiterated. Until proven by the council and or the Anbu team, this will be treated as a murder, as there is not enough circumstantial evidence to support what you say was an attempted assassination. There was no sign of forced entry or any jutsu used to get in this room, a vital component if you are to prove your innocence. Not that I'm saying you're guilty or anything, but you must look at this from an objective point of view. Comprehend? Hanabi battled with herself to keep her emotions under wrap. She nodded her head. I understand, father. With that, she bowed and left the room. Hiyashi surveyed the scene once again, trying to gain a new impression. He didn't doubt Hanabi's story one bit. It was the council, he feared, which might be quick to pass judgment. Conveniently, this just had to happen when the time of the new head of the clan ceremony was fast approaching. He too wondered if Hinata had anything to do with this, as it seems that the scales were tipping in her favor. Naruto wandered about the village in search of food, and a clear place to settle his thoughts and decide his intentions. He doubted he'd find someplace selling food at this time in the morning or a place to clear his mind. He wanted to think about him and Hanabi and if they had any potential. Well, from his point of view, all they had going for the both of them right now was a deep physical attraction. Not that he was complaining, but he wasn't one for one-time flings. He decided he was going to pursue her. His decision to pursue Hanabi brought about another astounding thought to him. That he was completely over his obsession with Sakura. Not to say that he'd given up on her. He still had to have his options, but she'd be more like something to fall back on. He'd noticed that all his efforts had not been in vain, as she was gradually swaying his way. She was more open with him. But enough about Sakura, he was now on Hanabi's wagon. He'd known Hanabi for only about a week and a half now. He figured he needed to get to know her more while he was on vacation. However, the only problem seemed to be Hiyashi and Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi was a problem because he was a publicity risk to Naruto. Since Naruto had been labeled a Hokage hopeful by Tsunade and several other important people, he'd become a sort of a super celebrity. He'd already been a celebrity since people had heard, and some witnessed, him beating Gaara when he was the one-tailed beast. Anyway, because of this, Kakashi and Jiraiya had the brilliant idea to get rich off of him by selling him out to the local tabloids. His whole life was turning into a public event. He had fan clubs that staked out his house sometimes. It was disconcerting. Anyway, the point was that, if anyone got wind that he had his eyes on Hanabi, he would be bothered relentlessly by tabloids, and Hanabi would receive all sorts of death threats from his numerous fan clubs. The death threat thing had happened before. People had noticed that he'd been hung up around Sakura, and so she had been threatened. It wasn't a big deal as no one in their right mind would mess with Sakura. For peace sake, she was the Hokage's apprentice after all. And the one foolish person who had tried to physically threaten Sakura was still in a coma. He wasn't worried about her. He was more worried about what the attention might cause Hanabi. He'd have to talk to her about this thing they had going on. Naruto strolled through the streets completely caught up in his thoughts. Somehow he'd ended up near Iruka's house. Since he was hungry, and Iruka always had a well-stocked pantry, he decided to pay a visit. He just hoped that the man was not doing anything inappropriate. The last time Naruto showed up unannounced, he was privileged enough to catch Iruka and Kakashi having what Sakura called titillating manwai. She got off on that kind of thing. It was a scarring experience for him. Naruto never made it to Iruka's house though, as when he was a mere corner away from his destination, when he spotted two shadowy figures on the corner of the street. From his experience, shadowy figures were always up to no good. Take Shino for example. Naruto figured he probably used those bugs to spy on little girls and boys. Being the nosy person he was, he faded into the shadows and tried to sneak up on them unnoticed. He was able to get close enough to hear what they were saying but not close enough to actually see them. So was the mission a success? One of the figures asked. He had a deep rumbling voice. No, she is not dead, but there is enough evidence there to frame her. However, I was not told that there was going to be another assassin there. This person had a neutral tone. Someone else was there. Yes, she killed him. She was incredible. Shall I try again? There was a moment of silence. No, I will inform my client of the situation, so wait until you hear from me. You should recuperate. You look like hell. I thought I was done for. She has more than one fighting style, as the one I prepared for was not the one she used. Very well then. I shall obtain more information about her and report it back to you. From what you say, it seems that my client is not the only one interested in doing away with her. That is all until further notice. The shadowy figure nodded. Understood. I will be preparing myself for the next mission. I will not underestimate her again. You shouldn't have to begin with. You couldn't possibly have thought that she was weak. After all, she is in the main family, and one of the heiresses no less. The figure what the deep voice said. The other figure nodded, and with that the two shadowy figures disappeared into the early dawn, oblivious of Naruto. After a few minutes, Naruto emerged from his listening place. See, he was rarely wrong. Suspicious shadowy figures always were up to no good. Since they mentioned main family, he assumed that they were speaking in relation to the Hyuga clan, which meant that something went down not too long ago. He also wondered if they were talking about Hanabi or Hinata. In any event, he needed to let someone know what he'd learnt. He took off in the direction of the Hokage Tower, fighting the soothing fingers of sleep. Oba-chan, Naruto whispered, knocking slightly on the bedroom window of the Hokage. Oba-chan, Naruto let out a yawn. He wanted to go to sleep so badly, but what he'd just heard had to be passed on to someone with a high rank. And because he didn't know of any Anbu, and the Junin he knew were either sleeping or on a mission, he figured the next best person had to be the Hokage. It was a good thing that he was close to Tsunade, or else he would have been up Cookie Creek. If anyone else had tried knocking on the bedroom window of the Hokage, they'd be beaten, arrested, and most likely beaten again. Naruto sighed. Either Tsunade was ignoring him or was in deep drunken slumber. Naruto figured it'd most likely be more the latter than the former. Shoulders slumping in defeat, Naruto turned to leave. He would just have to come back later in the morning. In a rare stroke of genius, Naruto figured that it would be smart to leave a note or something in case he didn't make it back before Tsunade left for work. He took out a pen he had in his pocket and scribbled a brief summary of what he saw on the back of an exploding tag. He then slipped it underneath the door and left, heading towards home. Several hours later, Hanabi hugged her knees to her chest, and let the streams of water cover her like a blanket. Even though the water was beating heavily on her face, she could still feel the hot tears escape from her eyes. She could not find any witnesses who were willing to vie for her. They were either too scared of her or thought she deserved what was happening to her. In fact, since news got out that the assassin she killed was a Hyuga, the whole estate seemed to be against her. It was almost as if the whole estate had wished if the assassin had actually killed her. She wondered the possibility for a brief moment if the clan actually was out to get her. She could remember all of the hurtful things everyone said when she went to the Branch family asking for witnesses. If they didn't slam their door in her face, they called her names and said unrepeatable things. Had she really been that bad towards them? Was she really a bitch? The only people who'd been helping her was Neji, Mamehaba-sama, her father, and, believe it or not, Hinata. Though Hinata pretended that she could care less. Hanabi figured if things weren't looking great in her favor, she'd have to make a run for it. She wasn't going to die just yet. She couldn't leave Konoha though. If she did, there would be an endless search for her. Every moment she'd have to be on the run. There was no such thing as a Hyuga missing nin, the set who tried often didn't make it very far. Konoha had far too much allies for her to hide anywhere fast. It would take a long time to get to enemy territory, and besides, before she even reached, she would bound to buck up with Konoha allies or ninja. If she were to run, her only choice would be to hide in plain sight. And to do that, you needed friends, something she didn't have. She could only think of one person who'd have a weak inkling to want to help her, and she doubted that person would want to put up with the risk. Then again, a sharp knock resonated throughout the bathroom, followed by a sharp voice, 5 more minutes, Hanabi. Hanabi scowled. Also, since word got out, the Branch family had been calling her by her name only. Instead of Miss Hanabi or Hanabi-sama, it was now Hanabi or you girl. Not that she minded, but it was sort of disconcerting. By the way, she had guards now, from the Branch family. She found them funny because all of them knew that, if she really wanted to, she could kick their asses and make a run for it. They were afraid of her. Hanabi sighed and turned off the water. She stood up and stretched. Water ran down her body like tiny rivulets ran down a mountain. In a moment of complete randomness, she stepped out of the tub and shook herself like a dog, causing water to splash everywhere. She stood in front of the fogged-up mirror and quickly tied her hair into a loose ponytail. Then she pulled a few strands loose from both sides of her hair that they fell loose over her face. The loose bangs was an added benefit as they helped hide her features, thus if she lost focus, her bangs would hide anything her face might reveal. Usually she wore her hair out, much like her father does, but special occasions called for practicality. In the event that she had to run, she'd look more dangerous this way, especially with her newly perfected glare. They'd think twice before attacking her. Hanabi carefully tied the kunai pouch to both thighs. They were special kunai that would not be detected by any Byakugan. They were compliments of Mameha Ba-sama. She then donned on her fishnet shirt, followed by a sleeveless black shirt. Then she quickly slipped on a pants skirt so short that they couldn't be classified as an article of clothing. They had to be short, so that they didn't get in the way if she needed to use the kunai. At least the skirt part was a modest length, it had a high slit. You couldn't really notice it if she didn't move fast. Then finally, she shrugged on her hyuga robe. It was a thick cloak made of a heavy material. It was almost a burden to put on. With one last check in the mirror, Hanabi donned on her new glare and walked out of the bathroom. When Hanabi entered the living room, everyone quieted and turned to look at her. She'd been looking at the ground, but as soon as she held her head up and unleashed her piercing glare, everyone turned their head elsewhere, pretending to find something else of interest. Hanabi glanced around the room. It seemed that the Anbu investigative team had yet to arrive. She recognized the Hyuga medical examiner talking with someone from the council. Some reps from the Branch family was here, along with a few of the guard. Hinata and Neji were nowhere to be seen. So who was going to speak on her behalf, or was she to speak for herself? Not that it mattered, she was always on her own. She claimed a seat next to a member from the council. This member was known as the worst one in the decrepit bunch of retired ninja and Hyuga heads that made up the council. So, the elder member began, "How did you kill him? They aren't letting us in to see the murdered body until the Anbu have arrived." Hanabi almost flinched at the word murder. In a sharp and arrogant tone that was bound to irritate the old member, she replied, "The unfortunate assassin met his ill-fated demise from a reflexive Jukin strike to the chest. It was a technique that was to be used in dire circumstances. And I do believe that being in a corner, with someone trying to cut your throat is a dire circumstance. Don't you think?" With that said, Hanabi raised her chin at the council member, and rudely turned her head at him. It felt good to put him in his place. She tried not to smirk when she heard Mameha Ba-sama shout from somewhere in the kitchen, "You let him know, girl." Several of the other people, who were in the room, snickered. The council member made a rude noise and walked proudly outside. After his exit, the tension in the room became noticeably lighter. Hanabi was about to leave, to go and obtain something to drink, when a servant announced that the Anbu had arrived. Hanabi instantly went in panic mode, though her face was still impassive. The moment of dread was approaching fast, and she was not ready for it, despite the pep rallies she'd been giving herself in the bathroom. Hanabi had been expecting the investigative team to consist of a few masked ninja. However, she and everyone else was surprised to see the Hokage's aide accompanying the team. The medical ninja, dressed in her usual dark robe, was the odd one out amongst the Anbu, who were dressed in the standard black cloak. Shizune glanced around the room, searching for Hanabi. She'd heard a lot about the girl from Kakashi. She found it interesting that Hanabi would choose Naruto to have an affair with. According to Kakashi, he'd caught the two on several occasions in very compromising positions. Of course, this was supposedly a secret, as Naruto would never pass Hyuga standards. Shizune let out a chuckle as she gazed the room, which caused several of the infamously arrogant people to stare at her. She pretended not to hear the curious whispers as to why the Hokage sent her own aide along with the Anbu. A murder within the Hyuga compound was big news. The Hokage sending her aide and guard to investigate a murder was bigger news. Shizune figured her presence here would add fuel to the gossip mill that was already ablaze. Before Shizune could approach Hanabi, Hiashi materialized in front of her and said, "I am most surprised that you are here, Shizune-sama. I can't begin to fathom why the Hokage sent her aide, or how she got to know of this case, as the rest of the clan is just becoming aware of this incident." Shizune smiled at him and said, "Hiashi-sama, it is quite a pleasure to meet you, though not under these circumstances." They bowed to each other before Hiashi motioned for her to follow. "As for why Tsunade-sama sent me," she continued, "I myself do not know what her true motive for sending me here for. However, I can tell you that she is most interested in Hanabi, although I have yet to figure out why. I presume, if she was not so busy, she would have come here herself." It wasn't until Shizune stopped talking that she realized that almost everyone who was in the room was behind them. Hiashi thought for a moment before asking, "How is it that Hokage-sama became aware of this incident so fast? I mean, I know she has access to an unlimited information channels, but it is an enigma that has me truly puzzled." Before Shizune could answer him, he quickly added, "I don't mean to come across as defensive, but I would like to know if I would need to tighten security around here." "Ah," Shizune said, she'd been expecting this question. "Well, if it wasn't for Naruto, she wouldn't have known about it." Shizune replied, "Well, funny thing about that really, one of our ninjas who was on patrol spotted some suspicious-looking people, which he chose to shadow. The people he shadowed just happened to be one of the assassins that got away and his boss or something. Our ninja wasn't able to follow them, so he documented what he saw, and slipped it underneath the Hokage's office. Naturally, when Tsunade-sama went in, she spotted it and sent us straight away. The ninja hadn't left his name, so we weren't able to do an immediate follow-up, but an inquest is ongoing. Tsunade had told her that she was not supposed to reveal that Naruto was the one who'd found out about the assassin. Tsunade was being cautious just in case the people behind the assassination were in the clan itself. She didn't want anyone ordering a hit on Naruto. Hanabi, who'd been listening to Shizune's explanation, almost wept in relief. Shizune's presence and explanation was all the witness she's need. Though, it would even be better if she could find out who this ninja was and asked him to testify on her behalf. She'd be in the clear soon enough if things went her way. When the group of 15 or more ninjas reached the supposed crime scene, Hiashi undid the seal in front of the door, and told the Hyuga medic nin, who were inside preventing the seal from destroying the body, that they were now relieved of their duty. The Anbu quickly substituted with the Hyuga medics, and kept on preventing the seal from activating. Shizune had yet to do her examination of the body. When Shizune stepped into the room, and crouched over the body, everyone decided they wanted to see what she was doing. Thus, they tried to squeeze themselves into the room, which was only big enough to host 5 people comfortably. Noticing the sudden increase in body heat, Shizune faced the crowd of arrogant seniors and politely said, "I think it would be easier, and much faster, if there were less people in the room. So with the exception of Hanabi and Hiashi-sama, I would greatly appreciate it if the rest of you would please leave." When no one budged, she added, "Unless you guys are willing to see me slice open this body, exposing decaying flesh and viscous blood, while I use my scalpel to scrape away organ tissue and bone tissue to be analyzed. To which I'll also have to remove organs, which is bound to be unpleasant as they'll be a horrid yellowish-green tinge, and there might be maggots in the intestines that I might have to remove, let's not forget the smell, which could pose several serious health risks along with. The room was empty before she got to finished. Shizune, along with one or two of the Anbu, chuckled when the door closed with a bang. What a shame, ninjas that are squeamish, lol. Shizune said, prepping her hand. An unnerved Hanabi, along with a slightly twitching Hiashi, stood in one corner away from Shizune, looking quite uncomfortable. Hanabi swallowed and asked, Shizune-sama, are you really going to do that stuff? Hanabi was quite sure if she had to sit and watch what Shizune described, she'd either pass out or show the medic nin a digested version of what she had for breakfast. Of course not, Shizune exclaimed, I only said that to get rid of them. Shizune swore she saw Hiashi sigh in relief. Returning her attention back to the task at hand, Shizune proceeded to inspect the body, which detailed her running one hand covered in blue chakra down the length and width of the body, while running another hand covered in green chakra up the width and length of the body. Hanabi had no clue as to what the medical ninja was doing, but from a visual perspective it looked like she was either molesting the body or sensing for something. Hanabi preferred to think the medic nin was doing the latter. Shizune stood up, her task complete. She cleansed her hands and stated, well, cause of death is major damage to all major internal organs, definitely a deed done by a Hyuga. So, care to tell me what happened? Hiashi redirected Shizune's questioning gaze to Hanabi. Hanabi sighed and recounted in meticulous detail what happened. After that was done, Shizune recorded what was said on a scroll she had hidden in the mystiques of her robes. So that is all? Hiashi asked. He had to take care of some other important business now, along with scheduling the time for Hanabi's trial. Shizune nodded at his question and watched as he exited the room. Through the open door, she could see the people who she'd kick out swarm around him like bees to honey. Hanabi was about to follow suit but was stopped in her tracks when Shizune placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. May I have a word with you, in private? Hanabi awkwardly nodded and motioned for Shizune to follow her. Shizune sent one of the Anbu a glance before following Hanabi out. She was confident that they could handle the job from here on out. Hanabi led Shizune, in silence, past the main family complexes, past the training grounds and into the forest. When she was satisfied that they were a good distance away from prying eyes, she stopped. Shizune smirked and playfully asked, are we even in the border anymore? Shall I summon Tun Tun and ask her to fetch my travel documents? Despite her impassive composure, Hanabi heard a rare chuckle escape her lips. Hanabi said, the reason I took you so far is that they can still use their Byakugan to read our lips. This way, if they try, they'd have to be quite near, and I'd sense them if they did. Shizune nodded, not that she minded. Anyway, Shizune started, the reason I asked to speak with you is to tell you that I lied when I said that we didn't know who the ninja was that tipped us off. At Hanabi's puzzled expression, Shizune explained, we have reason to believe that the hit on you was ordered by someone within your clan, and if I had revealed the name, they might have tried to get him too. Now the reason I am telling you this is because you will need all the help you can get. From an objective point of view of the crime scene, you look guilty by all accounts. Tsunade-sama wishes your well-being only because you seem to make our tipster happy, and she favors him like a grandson. By now you probably know who I am talking about. Our tipster was Naruto. I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse, but what I do know is that, if you can get him to testify on your behalf, you'll be in the clear as, through him, you'll have the backing of the Hokage, indirectly. Have fun trying to get him to willingly come down to the estate to testify, lol. Well, I have to give my report. Good luck. With that said, Shizune vanished in a swirl of leaves. A confounded Hanabi slowly slid to the forest floor. Great. Now she had to see the blonde. Hanabi blushed at the last time they spoke. She wouldn't mind if things went the way they were going last time they met, though given her current situation, things were bound to be awkward if they did. She fingered the piece of paper in her hand with Naruto's address. He'd better be home, she thought, or else. After quietly sneaking off of the estate, Hanabi stealthily made her way towards the address Shizune-sama had given to her. She had to make this unannounced visit as fast as possible. If they, the council elders, discovered she was off the premises without being authorized to leave, her situation would worsen. She could already imagine them coming up with some crackpot reason as to why she left without telling anybody. She imagined they'd accuse her of planning her escape when she will be proven guilty or some other bullshit along those lines. Hanabi looked at the address in her hand and then at the fading address on the sign in front of her. Sure enough, the addresses matched, but she wasn't sure if she was in the right place. She'd never been allowed to go to this district before, and now she knew why. This part of Konoha would be called or classified as a dump or a slum. As she never been here before, she didn't know what term was used. In any event, she was prepared. Although she never visited this district before, she had heard more than enough about it to make her cautious. Still, she couldn't believe Naruto would live in a place like this. She reckoned he was probably a poor ninja or something, which was surprising considering his fame. In fact, she didn't even know what he was famous for, just that he was famous. She figured she'd ask him later. Well, if he was willing to help her, she'd pay him back by giving him a more decent place to live. She could more than afford it. And what made her happy about that was that if she did help him out, she'd be using her own money and nothing from the clan. Hanabi frowned at the houses and buildings with their overgrown yards, graffitied walls, and boarded up windows. Yep, she thought as she passed them, he could do better. She'd see to it that he does better. After all, a Hyuga like herself shouldn't be involved with someone who would choose to live in such an environment. Conveniently for Hanabi, there were few people about on the dilapidated streets, and those who were about, blended in with the dirty dumpsters and the ugly trash that decorated the ground. Hanabi roamed the area looking for Naruto's apartment. The paper Shizune-sama had given her had stated that he lived on the top floor of the only 5-story building in the area. She had also said that there was no way Hanabi could miss the structure as Naruto had put his signature on the building. When Hanabi found the building, she did a double take. Then she grinned. The building was shaped like a rectangle with a square cut out in the middle of it. The square served as a courtyard of sorts. The building, in its entirety, was painted a dull blue color, except for the top floor, which was painted a dull orange color with brighter orange swirls placed at random places on the walls. Thus the building ended up having a single orange stripe. Hanabi chuckled again. She wondered how Naruto managed to persuade the landlords to paint the building that color. She admired the building as she walked through the gates and up the stairs. She counted 4 doors on each floor, and concluded that the apartments had to be spacious, as the building itself could take up half of the branch family's training grounds, and the training ground was excessively huge. Hanabi arrived at the top floor and glanced around. There was only one door on this floor. She shrugged and walking down the long hallway and knocked on it. She waited a few seconds before knocking on it again. A minute passed and she knocked on the door again. After 5 minutes, she started pounding on the door. She was sure he was home. He didn't seem like the type to rise anytime before noon, and it was only around 10 or so. Hanabi was so into pounding at the door that she didn't realize she'd been pounding on Naruto's chest until he grabbed a hold of her hand. Sorry, Hanabi's apology was interrupted as Naruto yanked her into the room and slammed the door shut. Naruto scowled. He despised being rudely awakened when he was sleeping. And Hanabi pounding on his door was, by his standards, considered to be rude. He was always irritable and cranky when he woke up early. He stalked past Hanabi and headed towards the kitchen. After pouring himself a cup of juice, he realized that Hanabi wasn't in the kitchen with him. He screwed up his face in annoyance and walked back out to the front. As he suspected, she was still standing by the door, analyzing his flat. "Are you coming or not?" he asked, leaning against the archway that led to the kitchen. Hanabi scowled at him and replied, "You know, standard etiquette states that a person should stay put unless invited in." Quote, comma, quote. Naruto scoffed and went back into the kitchen. Hanabi smirked and took her shoes off before following Naruto. She had to say though, his flat looked expensive. Mahogany flooring, satin couches, a flat screen TV that took up half a wall, and lots of space were a few things that she noticed as she followed him. Though, it wasn't until she arrived at the kitchen and peeked through another archway located at the other end of the vast kitchen that she realized the entire top floor was his flat. Naruto settled himself on the edge of the wood and metal island, sipped his juice, and stared at Hanabi for a few seconds. He thought it funny that she matched his kitchen. He could grow accustomed to seeing her in his kitchen. Who was he kidding? He told himself, he didn't even know her that well. The only thing that they'd established was that they were physically attracted to each other. He sighed. He wondered if there would be anything more than physical attraction between them. He doubted it though. She didn't seem like the strings attached type. Little did he know that similar thoughts were racing through Hanabi's mind. So, Naruto started, what brings you knocking at my door so early in the morning? Hanabi scoffed and rolled her eyes. She shrugged out of her hyuga robes and neatly folded it over the back of a chair. She then sat on a stool that was opposite the island, and turned it around so that she was facing Naruto and her back was pressed against the counter. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the regalia she was wearing underneath the robe. Going or coming from a mission? He asked. He wondered if she always dressed like that under those robes. Something told him she did. It left much to his imagination. You know, Hanabi started in a condescending tone, you have bad social skills. I'd like something to drink please. Naruto merely raised an eyebrow and said, so, you come to my house and wake me up out of my much needed rest, to ask me for something to drink. Naruto watched as Hanabi's lips quivered for the slightest of seconds. He assumed that was her version of a chuckle. He hopped off the island and fished around in his cupboards for a clean glass. He rinsed it out then poured her some juice. He handed it to her. Hanabi took the glass and stared at it as if it was some type of deadly poison. She looked up at him. Who told you I wanted juice? She asked. Ah, that's too bad, Naruto replied, I only stock juice and ramen in my house. Hanabi drank it anyway. Ah, I need your help with a little problem I have. Hanabi stated. Does this concern the assassination thing? Naruto asked, reclaiming his seat on the island. He'd figured that someone from the Hyuga clan would be seeking him out soon. Seeing as he overheard the assassins talking, it was fate or convenience or luck that it happened to be Hanabi. Yeah, Hanabi replied. She figured it would be best if she got straight to the point. You see, 2 ninjas came to assassinate me a few hours after you left, she blushed, I killed one of them and the other one escaped. The one I killed happened to be a Hyuga from the branch family and so. Naruto listened intently as Hanabi gave him a detailed version of what happened, and why she needed his help. I believe someone is trying to frame me. Hanabi concluded. It was the only reasonable and logical assumption she could have come up with. Why do you think that? Naruto asked, quite bemused. The title match for clan leader is coming up. If anything happens to me, for example if I die or become imprisoned, Hinata automatically gets the title and vice versa. Hanabi stated, I think this is all some part of a scheme to ensure Hinata becomes leader. Hanabi frowned, and a thought ran through her mind. Would it be that bad if Hinata became leader? The only consequence of that would be her getting sealed. Surely there was some way to bypass that though. I'm kind of sketchy on Hyuga standards, Naruto admitted, but if Hinata won, wouldn't that mean you'd get sealed? Yes, it would, Hanabi replied. And that's the only problem. I'd gladly hand over my title as heiress to her if that stupid sealing rule wasn't in place. She scowled. She detested them and their ridiculous traditions. Naruto lowered his face, so that she wouldn't see his smile. He couldn't help it. She looked sort of cute when she scowled. Here she was, asking him for his help, and all he could do was smile at her and think how cute she was. He also found it funny that they'd officially met only 2 weeks ago, and here she was sitting up in his kitchen, like they were old friends or something. So, what do you want me to do about that? Naruto asked, puzzled. He was positive there was nothing he could do about the ceiling thing. Or maybe there was something. Hanabi sighed. She felt almost defeated. Well, there's nothing you can do about the ceiling thing. But, you can help me out of this trial thing. Shizune-sama told me that you overheard the assassin who escaped. If you can make a convincing argument to the council, on my behalf, that they were assassins, then I'd be home free. Will you do it for me? She swallowed. Please. Naruto smiled at her. Yeah, I'll do it. But what's in it for me? This time, Hanabi smirked. She was expecting he'd say something like that. I figured you'd say something like that, so, is a repeat of last night good for you? Hell, she wouldn't mind doing it. She was actually enjoying herself, until Kakashi and that pink-haired girl popped up. She had a nasty feeling that they were up to something. Naruto considered her offer. He'd be stupid if he didn't accept her offer, but what's to say that after this whole ordeal is over, she'd go about her business, pretending he never existed. He started, you make an exceptional offer. Hanabi blushed and lowered her face. But, he continued, I'll have to take your offer before my board of directors for deliberation. Give me a minute, will you? This will not take long. Hanabi stared at him as he made 3 shadow clones. The clones in Naruto moved to one side of the kitchen, and were actually debating her offer. Hanabi could not believe that he was serious. A rare chuckle escaped her lips, as the debate was concluded. The clones vanished, and Naruto walked back over to her, with a mile-wide smile plastered on his face. Well, the board of directors does not approve of your offer, he started. Hanabi almost fell out of her chair. However, the board is willing to compromise your offer. Instead of a repeat performance, I want to go on a date with you, a real one. How about that? Sure, I guess, Hanabi replied. She wondered when things had become so friendly between them. I guess I'll get back now. I'm not even supposed to be off the estate. The trial starts at 3. You'd better come. She slid off her seat and glided towards Naruto, who merely raised an eyebrow. As an incentive, Hanabi rose on the tips of her toes and kissed him teasingly on the lips. Before Naruto's hands could pull her towards him, she quickly stepped out his reach. Nah, come and maybe you'll get another one, she quickly slipped on her robes. You know, you are a very good tease. Naruto stated, while he followed her to the door. Hanabi paused before she descended the staircase, and said, I like you. I don't know why yet, but I like you. Expect to get teased often. She stuck out her tongue and disappeared down the stairs. Naruto chuckled to himself. He was so going to enjoy his day. He was going to make it fun, seeing as this was his last day of vacation. Hanabi silently and stealthily crept back onto the estate. As she made her way around the branch family quarters, she realized her absence went unnoticed. Any branch family members she came across either avoided looking at her or sent her glares. However, when she entered the main family compound, she received nods and small greetings from those who thought they were superior to the branch family. She fixed a scowl to her face and ignored them. As she walked lazily through the house, she realized most of the elders and servants and branch family representatives, who were there earlier, were now absent. She figured they were probably in a meeting with her father. She sighed. It wasn't like she was really worried about the trial, because if push came to shove, she could just invoke the third Hyuga Act, which would, in case she was proven guilty, halt all trial proceedings until the title match took place. The only problem with this was that if she lost the match she would be at the mercy of Hinata. And since Hinata had the branch family in her bosom, they'd be expecting her to dish out a cruel punishment to Hanabi as retribution for killing the assassin. Speaking of Hinata, she wondered if she had anything to do with this whole assassination thing. Hanabi turned on her heel and headed towards Hinata's room. Hanabi found it strange that no one was casting eyes at her sister. Then again, everyone thought Hinata was a generous, gentle soul. The fools, Hanabi thought. As she made her way towards her sister's room, she noticed the door was cracked open a sliver. Hanabi placed her palm on the door and pushed it open. Hinata. She faltered at the sight before her. Oh wow, Hanabi thought. So here was her saintly sister pushed up against the wall, hair mustard, skin flush, with one leg wrapped around some guy's back, arms wrapped tightly around his neck, and she was so passionately sucking face that she nor her buddy noticed Hanabi. The fact that the two of them here missing a few items of clothing only made Hanabi deduce that they were about to do something naughty. Hanabi stayed in the doorway unnoticed as the guy buried his head in the Hinata's neck, causing her to throw back her head and moan rather loudly. A malicious grin broke out on Hanabi's face. Whoa, any louder and people might think you're in pain, Hanabi stated with a smirk on her face. Hinata's eyes flew open in shock. Hanabi. She pushed herself away from her lover and quickly donned her robe, which was pulled around her feet. Hanabi. Hinata said, out of breath, how dare you enter my room without announcing yourself? I could have you punished for that. Actually, dear sister, Hanabi started, in a bored drawl, your door was never closed. It was crack open. How was I supposed to know that you were entertaining somebody in here? Hinata looked lost for words. She was getting so angry that her breath came out in ragged pants. Get out of my room. It was then that Hanabi noticed the guy was avoiding looking in her direction. She completely ignored her sister's demands and tried to catch a glimpse of his face. But every time she came close to him, he'd move away from her, or deliberately turn his head in the other direction. All she could see was a mass of black hair in a style she would say resembled the back of a small chicken. Darting underneath Hinata's reach, Hanabi managed to grab a hold of the guy. She was about to turn him around when Hinata grabbed her by the back of her robes and flung her forcefully out of her room. Hinata glared at her sister. You will speak of none of this. Hanabi snorted and quickly kicked Hinata in her shin and fled down the hall, into the safe confines of her own room. She locked her door and laughed maliciously. She wondered if Hinata realized her Byakugan was on. She doubted it though, she only had it on for a second or two, just enough to glimpse the guy's face. Hanabi smirked as she smoothed out her robe. She now had something to blackmail Hinata with. She'd been surprised to find out that it was not Kiba, however, she couldn't put a name to the guy's face though she was sure she'd seen him before. Pushing him and Hinata out of her mind, Hanabi quietly snuck back out of her room and made a beeline for the library. Hopefully, she'd be able to find something in there that would help her case. Naruto walked through the main business square in Konoha in the disguise of an old maid. It was the disguise he always used when leaving his home to go to his other house. Because he was becoming so famous, he figured he needed two houses. His first house was an expansive structure located in the heart of the main business square. This house served as a decoy for the media. In fact, any person who resided in the business square was famous in some way. And because of this, the square was frequented by media vultures waiting outside at all hours of the night, salivating, just to snap a picture of a celebrity. Naruto was smart enough to build his second house in the heart of the slums, the last place any media-affiliated person would think to look for him. And while he was in his house in the slums, he had a shadow clone walking about in his house in the square. Occasionally the clone would come outside to empty the garbage or wave at people, just to give the guys that he really was there. Thus, every morning, Naruto would walk to his decoy house in the guise of an old maid who worked for Naruto. Sure enough, most of his friends knew about his little plan to escape the media, but only Tsunade and Shizune, well and Hanabi now, knew where he truly lived. Oh, and Kakashi too. Till this day, Naruto still couldn't figure out how Kakashi found out. Naruto, playing his disguise well, hobbled through the square with the gait of an old woman. Many people hailed him and made way for him to pass. If it was one thing he learned from playing an old person is that the elderly received automatic respect for everything. They were allowed to skip lines, and got preferential treatment to everybody else, even the most famous of celebrities. Naruto smiled wryly at himself. He'd often abused this privilege. In fact, whenever he went to pay bills or do business in the square, he went in the guise of the old maid. He kept telling himself that one of these days he'd get caught. Naruto hobbled up the steps towards his decoy house. He ignored the flashes of light as media vultures took pictures of him as he opened the door. Naruto's maid arriving to work as usual, would be the caption of this picture in tomorrow's tabloid paper. He chuckled to himself. As soon as he closed the door, his clone appeared in front of him. While he made his way to the kitchen, the clone briefed him on what all activities happened during the night. He didn't miss much. He vanished his clone and dispelled his disguise. Naruto glanced at the clock. He still had about 2 hours to go before Hanabi's little trial thingy started. Since he'd thought up a good argument for her while he was walking here, he pretty much had nothing left to do. Grabbing a bottle of juice out of the fridge, he waddled to the living room and switched on the TV. Just in time to catch the beginning of Ino's show. You see, when Ino wasn't on a mission or on an assignment from Tsunade, or helping out with her parents' flower shop, she was an anchorwoman on everyone's favorite tabloid channel, Konoha Entertainment. KE was the channel the general public watched when they wanted the scoop and scandals of their favorite celebrities. Naruto could remember several times when Ino had tried to get him to do something scandalous, so she could dramatically announce it to the public. Naruto chuckled. Though he had to say, Ino had the face and the voice for it. He turned up the volume as Ino began her show. Good afternoon, Konoha. This is your ever favorite and beautiful anchorwoman, Ino Yamanaka speaking. She grinned brightly now. I know all of you are wondering who's gonna be our celebrity highlight for today. Well, let me tell you, it's no other than our favorite Hokage hopeful, and unpredictable ninja, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto smirked as a picture of him flashed on the screen. He wondered what Ino thought up this time. Now, since Naruto's fame began to spread through Konoha, everyone's been trying to catch him in some scandalous activity. Her grin got even wider. Well, our Mr. Good Deeds has been good until now. She now wore a wicked grin. Asterisk. It was almost as if she was smirking at Naruto herself. Naruto merely quirked his eye at the screen. They'd tried to pin him down in some scandalous activity before, but it didn't work. He doubted it'd work this time. We, at KE, have managed to get our greedy little paws on a certain item that would prove to all that Naruto Uzumaki is as scandalous as they come. Now, I know you all are like, what is she talking about? But, I tell you, it is very compromising. She chuckled. Now everyone thought that Naruto's love interest was the unyielding Sakura Haruno, the general director of the main hospital. However, this picture proves us very wrong. An intimate picture of Naruto and Hanabi flashed on the screen, and Naruto spat the juice out of his mouth. It was a picture of him and Hanabi when they first met, when she'd fallen on him out of the tree. Her hair was cascading round her head so her face wasn't visible. And she hadn't worn her Hyuga robes that night, so she would still remain anonymous. But it was clear that she was on top of Naruto in the picture. It wouldn't have been a bad picture if they were standing next to each other, but they were in such an intimate position that people would mistake them for lovers. But weren't they? Well, they had the potential to become lovers. Oh my gosh, Naruto thought. He was so screwed over. At least Hanabi was safe. There are thousands upon thousands of girls with black hair in Konoha. Oh yeah, that's Naruto alright. The question is, who is this femme fatale that has our Naruto in her little clutches? We would love to know. Wouldn't you also like to know how long this affair has been going on? Can you imagine if this chick turned out to be someone important? Or is it a mistress? Oh wow, wouldn't that be scandalously scandalous? Join us next week at this same time, and we just might have some answers for you. She smiled dazzlingly. This was brought to you by. Naruto shut off the TV. He wondered if Hanabi saw that. He figured she'd be serious, seeing as her title match was coming up and all. He could already imagine having to employ all his creativity in devising ways to avoid and evade the media. The show hadn't even been over 3 minutes yet and he could already hear the tabloids ringing his doorbell and pounding on his door. As he thought about it, he let out a frustrated yell. There was only one person who was there at the time who could have taken that picture. Naruto gathered himself together. He was going to have a little session with Kakashi. But first, he'd have to duck out the media. Oh well, he thought, time for the old lady disguise again. Hinata paced a path in the floor of her room whilst muttering expletives quietly to herself. Oh wow, I never knew you had such a potty mouth, her lover teased. Hinata snatched a pillow off her bed and threw it at him in retaliation. The guy caught it and chuckled. Don't get mad at me. I told you to come to my place but no, you were so sure that we wouldn't be disturbed. Hinata sent him a glare. And he smiled wryly at her. The guy glided up behind her and passionately embraced her. He buried his face in her hair and placed a kiss at the nape of her neck. Swaying with her in the gentle breeze that was blowing through an open window, he said, you know, I could take care of her if you want me to. Hinata leaned into the embrace and her anger disappeared. She thought for a moment. No, she stated, I'll do it myself. I know exactly how to deal with her. Her lover released her and pouted. You never let me do anything for you, her lover whined while twirling her around. Hinata stared into his flawless face and a smirk formed on her face. Really? I was thinking that I let you do a lot most of the time. You did a lot last week, especially last week. Her lover blushed and Hinata grinned. I mean besides that, you always do stuff yourself. I want to help, her lover said, moving away from her to dress himself. Hinata thought for a quick second. He had wanted to help her for some time now, but she didn't really want to involve him. But, she knew if she kept denying his help, he'd do something to help her anyway. And that was what she was afraid of. He could jeopardize her whole plan. Thus she had to think of a way to keep Hai occupied, while making him believe he was helping her out. Or maybe, he really could help her out. She was unsure what the clan's next move would be due to this whole assassination attempt on Hanabi. After the whole trial was over and the branch family was satisfied, people would start pointing fingers at her. And she'd be clouded with suspicion seeing that Hanabi was her opponent, and she would be the only one to benefit if something were to happen to Hanabi. Well, Hinata started, if you want to help so badly, you could find out who sent those assassins. That would be a great help. Her lover merely raised an eye. I thought you didn't care about that. As much as I don't want to, I do care. Hinata said truthfully. Regardless of our differences, Hanabi still is my sister. And as much as I like to berate her, I'd miss her if she died. Well, that and I'd be crowded in suspicion seeing that I'm contesting her for clan leader. Her lover said, figuring out her reasoning behind her request. I see, killing two birds with one stone. If you could present the person who hired the assassin to the main family, you'd be a little in their favor. Or if you could prove that there was no assassin, and Hanabi simply murdered him, the branch family would definitely be in your family. Smart. He nodded his head at her in approval. As always, you're quick to everything. Hinata said, smiling at him. She placed a kiss on his cheek. Now get out of here, and try not to get catch by the guards. I've work to do. I'll come by you in a day or two to see what you've come up with. Her lover bowed to her in a mock gesture. As you wish, you my lady. He hopped out the window and vanished in a blur of black. Hinata smiled. Now that he was pursuing that avenue, it left her time to devote a lot of attention to Hanabi. She cursed herself for leaving her door unlocked. Well, that's what she got for being impatient. Now, she had to find a new card to hold over Hanabi's head until her lover found out who hired the assassin. Hinata hummed a tune to herself while she made her way to the library for some quiet reading and planning. She was pleased with herself. Her plan was working after all. Occupy Hanabi with some guy so that she'd be too distracted to focus on her campaign for clan leader. It was working well, if she must say so herself. It was a pity that the guy had to be Naruto. The Elder Council was enamored with the Hokage, and anyone who had the Hokage in their back pocket would be in the council's favor. And since Naruto was the Hokage's heart, anyone who had Naruto ultimately had the Hokage. That was the only drawback with Hanabi pursuing Naruto. But it was something Hinata could easily fix. Hinata smiled and greeted the few servants and old heads she passed on her way to the library. She was going to look for some Hyuga law that would save Hanabi in case she was guilty of her supposed crime. Why was she going to do this? For appearances and promotional reasons, of course. Wouldn't she look good if she played the concerned sister looking out for her little sister's well-being? Yep, of course she would. Hinata chuckled to herself. Soon, she'd have this whole clan wrapped around her little finger, whether they liked it or not. After poring over old parchments, books, and scrolls for 2 hours, Hanabi finally unearthed 2 ways she could avoid being sealed if she lost the title match. 1. She could find some way to stall the match until she turned 18, then run away from the clan and hide behind the laws of the Konoha statute, which basically states she could do as she damn well pleased seeing as she'd be 18 and therefore, legally, an adult with no mandatory obligations. Or, she could go get engaged and marry herself off. Yep. That'd put a halt to everything. Hanabi snorted. Like hell I'd get married. No one good enough for me, she said aloud, speaking to her inner self. Or rather, there's no one willing to take you. Hanabi whirled around in her chair to meet the steady gaze of her older sister. She scowled. She didn't have time to banter with Hinata right now. However, she'd be lying if she said didn't want to irk her. So, done entertaining your guest already? Hanabi said loudly, hoping that a few servants were being nosy and eavesdropping. Did I kill the mood? I'm sorry. I was just looking out to protect my sister's honorable virtue. Hanabi's face broke out in a grin. Hinata had the urge to strangle Hanabi, but if she wanted her plan to work, she'd need Hanabi to agree to a truce. She sighed, and with much effort, managed to smile at Hanabi. I'm going to ignore that. Now, we haven't been the best of friends. You don't say, Hanabi interjected sarcastically. She was a bit wary of her sister. She had to be up to something. Hanabi wasn't one to beat around the bush, so she blatantly asked, what do you want? Bribe my silence. I wasn't planning on telling anybody. Well, not yet. Hinata frowned. She knew that Hanabi would be skeptical of any pleasantries presented to her, but she'd had a tiny sliver of hope that she'd play along. Oh well, she thought, might as well get to the point then. Actually no, however that would be good also. You know that only puts you on even footing with me. I keep your secret, you keep mine. I actually want to propose a truce of sorts. Hanabi quirked an eyebrow. If Hinata wanted a truce then something was up. However, if she could get Hinata off her back for a while, that'd be awesome. Then she could concentrate on getting out of her problems with the elders, her father, and the council. Hanabi figured it wise to at least listen to what she had to say. Go on, Hanabi said while rolling up the scroll she was reading. Hinata sat up in her chair and cleared her throat. Now, because you've been so busy getting in trouble and sneaking in and out the estate, you've hardly had enough time to prepare for our title match, and I wish to fight you at your best. So, I've decided to ask the council to postpone the match on my behalf until I think you are ready. Hanabi stared at her dumbfounded. What? Believe it or not, I didn't stutter Hanabi, Hinata stated firmly. Why? What do you stand to gain? What do you want in return? Hanabi rubbed her temple as the questions fired out of her mouth. Hinata smirked. This was going to be easier than she'd imagined. There was no way Hanabi would refuse her offer. I already gave you a probable reason why. And as for what I stand to gain is none of your concern. And in return, all you have to do is to continue doing what you are doing now. Which is, Hanabi prompted, gesturing with her hand. Hinata smirked at her sister. Keep seeing Naruto against father's wishes, thus keeping the council too busy to cast their eyes on me. What I'm after is actually for the greater good of the clan. Hanabi eyed her sister suspiciously. I thought you were into Naruto. Well, not anymore considering, she trailed off. Naruto was just a mere infatuation at the time, Hinata said smoothly. I don't need him anymore, Hinata thought with a chuckle. After all, he wasn't the only one who can tug on the Hokage's heartstrings. All she had to do was feed Sakura a heartfelt story and reel the bitch in. Once she could get Sakura under her paws, the rest would be child's play. I still won't let my guard down, Hanabi said, still trying to figure what Hinata was playing at. I wouldn't expect you to, Hinata replied, standing up. Just think about it for a while. She then quietly left Hanabi to muse about her offer. She smiled maliciously. Yep. Everything was falling in line. Soon she'd control everything. She couldn't wait to rub it in Hiyashi's face. Hanabi told herself she'd think over Hinata's offer more deeply later. She glanced at the clock on the wall. According to it, she still had about 2 hours to go before Naruto showed up. That's if he showed up. He had better come, she thought. She didn't know what she'd do if he didn't, but she'd think of something. With her contingency plan set and ready if the trial was not in her favor, Hanabi left the library and headed for the kitchen. When she arrived, it was nice and empty. She figured they were probably buying supplies for dinner. So she helped herself to whatever was left over in the fridge. As she finished her sandwich, a servant approached her and informed her that she had a visitor. Genuinely surprised, Hanabi asked, Really? Who is it? The servant unfolded a small parchment on which they wrote the guests' names. After scanning it for a second, he stated, Otura N. She's a rather old lady. Otura N. Hanabi thought, she didn't know anybody by that name. She repeated the name a few times in her head, then it dawned on her. She had to fight a smile from breaking out on her face. Escort her to the garden, please. Let her know I'll be a minute, Hanabi told the servant with a slight grin on her face. The servant faltered for a second. Hyuga Hanabi had just politely and nicely asked him to do something. And she'd said please. Oh wow, this was so going to be big news. He couldn't wait till his next 5-minute break. Right away, ma'am, the servant said before bowing and exiting the room. She burst out in giggles as the servant left the room. She had to give him credit though. At least he was imaginative. She prepared another sandwich and pot of tea. Putting 2 cups, the pot, and the sandwich on the tray, she went out into the garden. Otura-san, how nice of you to visit, Hanabi said with a bright and cheery smile. She placed the tray on a little stone block that was in front of the bench. The servants, who were taking a shortcut through the garden, balked at the sight of Hanabi serving someone else with a smile. This odd behavior piqued their interest. Who was this old lady that could make Hanabi serve her? Oh, I decided it was a nice day to come out the house. It gets boring sitting around the house all day waiting to kick the bucket. How nice of you to prepare a snack for me on such short notice, Otura-san said, her voice ancient and crackling, like old leather. Oh, don't mention it, Hanabi said cheerily, playing along with the charade. I'd been meaning to visit you, but I've been tied up. After a few minutes of mindless banter, Hanabi said, It's hot out here, isn't it? Let's go inside where it's cooler. She figured she gave the servants enough to gossip about. Oh, very well. The two of them made their way back into the kitchen, where they stopped briefly for Otura-san to eat her snack and drink her tea. Once they were finished, Hanabi led Otura to a hidden room that was located within the library. Hanabi could only begin to imagine what rumors were spreading around the estate. She figured every able-bodied Hyuga on the main family grounds would have their eyes and ears peeled. You can revert to your normal self now. Hanabi told Otura, we're safe in here. Nobody, probably except the cook, knows this room exists. And it's warded too, so no curious eyes can see it. Otura nodded and then exploded in a cloud of smoke. The smoke cleared, revealing a grinning Naruto. So, how was that? Hanabi glided towards him and gave him a peck on the lips. I'll give you points for creativity. She slipped out of Naruto's way before he could grab a hold of her. You are very mean, Naruto said, smiling. That's why you like me, Hanabi said in a teasing manner. Wow, who knew she was good at flirting? Naruto's face turned serious for a moment. You know, that's one of the reasons why I do. He gave her a gaze that made her heart beat a wee bit faster. She blushed and turned around, walking toward one of the chairs in the room. Naruto claimed a seat opposite her and studied the room. It was Spartan in nature, only containing a single cot and a few chairs, and a small table. So have you figured out a way to get me out of a guilty verdict? Hanabi asked, trying to get straight to the point. She had an inkling if they didn't get the matter out of the way, they never would. For some reason, the thought that she and Naruto were alone were distracting her. The two of them were alone. In a room that was impossible to find. Alone. And there was a cot. Alone, with 2 hours to spare. Maybe they could. Hanabi. Huh, what? Hanabi quickly asked, surfacing from her rather naughty thoughts. Naruto smirked at her. I wonder what distracted her, he thought. He pondered this for a few seconds. You do realize that we have a good opportunity here. He gave her that come hither look and wiggled his eyebrows at her. He wondered when he'd become so comfortable with her. And he also wondered if she realized she was becoming more open to him. He doubted it though. He wasn't going to point it out in any event. Hanabi blushed and turned her head. Pervert. Get serious, I need help here. There's no time for such things. Oh, I'm such a hypocrite, she thought. Naruto merely shrugged. It was just a suggestion. But you're a pervert too cause you were thinking it. Hanabi blushed guiltily. So, but you said it. She covered her mouth with her hand. She lowered her head in embarrassment. How dare her mouth betray her like that? Naruto laughed at her. Oh, wow, you're just as perverted as me. He narrowed his eyes at her. Hanabi the naughty. Hey, I like that. Hanabi squirmed in her seat, a tad bit uncomfortable. Having Naruto call her naughty was stirring up a feeling inside her she didn't trust herself to deal with. She took a deep breath and cleared her mind. Enough teasing, Hanabi stated, getting down to business. So, how are you going to help me? Naruto shrugged and Hanabi almost gave in to the urge to slap him. Now, Naruto chided. I can't really help you if I don't know what you're being charged for. Oh. She gave him a slight chuckle. How did I forget that? She asked herself. They're trying to charge me with murder, or at least manslaughter, along with some other trivial things that I can handle. Naruto gaped at her. Murder? What? An assassin comes to kill you and they charge you with murder. Hanabi sighed and let some of her sadness leak through the cracks in her facade. The Branch family doesn't like me at all. And most of the elder council is turning against me because I don't kowtow to their every order, whim and fancy. You could almost say I'm a black sheep, trapped yet free. Naruto suddenly stood up out of his chair and sat down beside her. Then he hugged her. A simple hug that let her know he was with her. At first she had stiffened up, but then she began to relax. That hug told her and explained to her everything, that for the first time, she found a friend. Hanabi sighed gently in Naruto's arms. As much as she'd love to stay that way, her moment of vulnerability was over. She wiggled out of his hold and looked at him with careful eyes. Thanks, she whispered, embarrassed. This whole thing was new to her and she didn't want to mess it up. Don't mention it, Naruto said smiling at her. He adopted a serious expression. Now about this trial thing. Seems to me the only way to clear yourself is to prove it was an assassination attempt. That much I figured out, which was why I asked you to come. Hanabi said, Shizune-sama told me you overheard their conversation, but knowing the council they won't just take your word for it. You'll need a good reason why someone will have you assassinated. Naruto commented. To back up my statement. Hanabi frowned, her brows furrowed together in concentration. Logically, the first person I'd point my finger at would be Hinata. Why Hinata? Naruto asked perplexed. Sure they didn't like each other, but it couldn't be that serious that she'd try to kill her own sister. We're both heirs for the Hyuga estate. Father is going to retire soon, which means one of us will have to take over from him. Normally, we'd fight a title match and the winner is the new leader. Hanabi mentioned. But, Hinata doesn't have the drive to purposely fight unless it's for protection. Hanabi scoffed. That's what she wants people to think. She's as nasty as they get. Besides, she always confronts me directly. I highly doubt she sent the assassin. Hanabi pondered the truce Hinata had proposed. Naruto pondered that for a second. If he were to take into account what happened in the Hokage's office, then there would be some truth to Hanabi's words. Maybe Hinata wasn't as nice as she seemed. Well, Naruto, lol, in any event it all came back to Hinata. No matter how hard you think about it, Naruto started, it all comes back to Hinata. The only way you might weasel your way out is if you point fingers at her and threw suspicion in her direction. Hanabi frowned. But my instinct tells me it isn't her. I know it wasn't her. Like I said, she always approaches me directly. Naruto gnawed his lip. You might not have any choice but to point fingers at Hinata. He thought deeply for a minute. If Hanabi wasn't inclined to think that it was Hinata, maybe it was someone else. He thought as he tapped his finger against his chin. Let's just say, hypothetically of course, something happened and both you and Hinata died. Who would be next in line to assume control? Hanabi's brow raised in slight surprise. She hadn't thought of that. I don't really know, she stated after thinking about it. That was a really good question. A bell chimed and Naruto glanced up at Hanabi questioningly. She sighed and replied, it's a time bell, and someone rings it every hour, which only means we're running out of time. She chewed her lip nervously. There was only an hour left before the trial. Maybe Naruto was right. The only thing she could do to save herself would be to cast suspicion on Hinata, whom she knew was innocent. Somehow, that just didn't settle with her. She sighed. Naruto couldn't think of any other way to get Hanabi out of her trial. Pushing suspicion on Hinata wouldn't necessarily clear her name, but it would buy her some time. Though, he knew someone who would know the precise course of action to take, but he didn't really want to go to him. If he went and nagged Shikamaru, his lazy friend would help them, but he'd ask questions. Questions that would inevitably lead to Ino finding out about him and Hanabi, and once that happened, everyone would find out and everything would be hell for both Hanabi and himself. He sighed in defeat. Although I don't want to, I guess I have no choice. I'll say Hinata tried to have me killed. Hanabi admitted. Though, she doubted that'd do anything but buy her time. Hanabi pushed all thoughts of her predicament out of her mind. She figured they had about half an hour before they had to leave her hidey hole. If things were going to go downhill anyway, she might as well enjoy herself before things started to suck. She deliberately pouted. Hey, Naruto. Wah. Naruto sputtered, suddenly pulled from his thoughts. What happened? Hanabi pouted and watched him bite his lip. She figured that was good. She smirked at him. Distract me, she asked in a seductive tone. Well, what she thought was seductive. Distract you, Naruto repeated, obviously flustered. Shouldn't you be concentrating on finding a way out of your trial? Hanabi pretended to scratch her ankle and slowly dragged her hand up her leg and let it settle on her thigh. She'd seen Hinata do this before when she was spying on her and her lover or whatever he was to her. I already agreed to blame Hinata. If there's nothing else I can do, why should I hurt my head? Distract me. Hanabi had ever so briefly hesitated doing this, her reason being she'd only just met him, but what the hell, she needed the excitement. It was at this moment she'd realized he was the first boy she'd taken a liking to and the first to kiss her, and the first one she'd sneaked in. He was a lot of her firsts. Naruto hissed out a breath. He was trying to ignore why it was that she'd run her hand over her leg, and how seductive her pout was. Oh, how he wanted to just snatch her and post her up against a wall. He clenched his jaw. Now was so not the time, but somehow, because they were in the main house, where it would be forbidden, it made the prospect of it all the more exciting. It was quite feasible too. Naruto swallowed and asked, distract you how? Hanabi smirked and slowly crossed her legs, arching her back a little in the process. She let out a raspy breath. She'd also seen Hinata do this. She chewed cutely on her bottom lip. You don't know how to distract me. Naruto opened his mouth and closed it. He moistened his tongue. This was so not happening, he told himself. However, his inner self replied, of course it is, believe it. What happened to the arrogant, hot-tempered girl he'd met only a week ago? He shook his head in reply to her answer. Hanabi smirked and leaned forward, bringing her shoulders together. She watched in glee as Naruto's eyes latched on her chest. This was yet another move she copied from Hinata dearest. She extended her hand and beckoned toward him. Well then, come here. Oh dear, oh no, oh my, Naruto muttered under his breath. How very fortunate and unfortunate was he. Hinata walked quickly through the halls, her hair bouncing with every step. Servants cleared out of her path, seeing that she was obviously in a rush. Damn it, she thought. Where the hell is that girl? In the midst of poring over scrolls to help her dear sister, she realized that the only way Hanabi was going to weasel out was if she blamed her attempted assassination on Hinata. Normally, such a thing like that wouldn't faze her, but lately she'd been dallying in something not quite legal, or illegal for that matter. And, Hanabi casting suspicion on her would only result in her every movement being shadowed, which meant she'd have to delay her plans. She strode up the stairs and pushed open her sister's door, only to find it empty. Damn, where the hell was that girl? She knew she didn't leave the estate, because she overheard several servants whispering that her sister had a guest. Hinata paused in the doorway, thinking of every possible place on the estate Hanabi could be. The Branch family compound was out of the question. Hanabi going there would be like putting a live chicken in a nest of hungry snakes. She wasn't in the library, or on any of the training grounds, which only meant she had to be somewhere inside the house. She had to find her before her trial and somehow bribe her. Hinata turned on her Byakugan and searched her sister's room. No chakra bodies were present, however she did catch a glimpse of flickering blue from the corner of her eye. She turned towards it and realized it was coming from her room, right across the hall. Hinata smirked. Of course, her room would be the last place she'd expect her sister to be hiding in. But what the hell could Hanabi be doing in her room? She turned off her Byakugan and barged into her room. Since all the servants would be heading toward the trial hall, she could raise all the hell she wanted. Hanabi, what the hell are you? She stopped suddenly when a kunai was pressed to her throat. She swallowed and suddenly stilled. What do you want? She asked quietly. Well, you're not Hanabi. Then again, the orders were to kill the heir. Didn't really state which one. Too bad for you. Just as the assassin drew back his hand to slice her throat, Hinata released sharp chakra from her entire body, pushing away her assailant and his kunai. She bounded towards her window and faced her opponent, who was dressed in the typical gaudy assassin outfit of all black. How typical, she thought. Some people just had no fashion sense. Who sent you? Hinata was cut off again as the assassin rushed her. This person is good, she thought, as she parried all of his blows easily. But I'm better. She twirled on her heel and delivered a chakra-enforced kick to her opponent's gut. The assassin had tried to cushion the blow by blocking with his arms, a feat which was in vain as the blow shattered his forearms and sent him through the wall. Too bad for you, Hinata chuckled, while walking towards her supposed assassin, who had managed to sit up. Now, tell me, who sent? Hinata barely dodged the kunai that came flying out of the assassin's mouth. In the time she took to dodge, her opponent had run through the door. Hinata thought maliciously, I love it when they run. Using her Byakugan, she easily tracked the assassin. Servants and guards gave startled yelps as Hinata and her prey played hopscotch around them. Shuriken and kunai flew randomly about them, breaking through windows or sometimes striking aloof bystanders. The chase led them to the gardens behind the council meeting room which, conveniently, was used as the trial hall. Hinata dodged several kunai and a vicious kick with a handstand. She then countered with a mean kick to her opponent's already broken arm. It wasn't until she was a safe enough distance from her opponent that she realized they were right behind the trial hall. It was then that she realized a way to postpone Hanabi's trial. And it would be very dramatic. She grinned. If you tell me who sent you, I'll spare your life. Hinata suggested. She quietly gathered chakra in her palms. It doesn't matter. The assassin rasped. If I don't kill you, I'll die anyway. In a blink of an eye, Hinata was crouched in front of the assassin, with her palms on his torso. Then, die now. Before the assassin could draw back, Hinata thrust her palms in the assassin's chest. Jiyuken. The assassin flew through a small rose bush and through the wall of the trial hall, and came to a rolling stop in front of the table of council members. The assassin struggled to sit up, but the damage was too great. With a shuddering cough of blood, the assassin died. The bell chimed signaling the turn of the hour and Hinata smiled to herself. Her timing was perfect. She didn't doubt for a second that she looked damn dramatic walking through the debris of the wall. She could feel the stares of shock and awe of everyone in the room on her. She chuckled inwardly at the attention. Hinata was a badass and she knew it. Hinata, Hiyashi exclaimed. What is this? An assassin, Hinata stated, taking labored breaths to calm herself down. Lord Hiyashi, stay back please. Hiyashi's guards jumped in front of him. Please, Hiyashi said with disgust, pushing past his guards heading toward the dead assassin. He turned towards the head of security for the Hyuga compound. Kazama, how is it another assassin got into the estate without your knowing? Kazama faltered for a moment, then said, Hiyashi-sama, there were no reports of a breach of the estate. Hinata crouched over the body, pulled off the mask, and gasped. What? Who is it? Hiyashi demanded, elbowing his eldest child out of the way. He inhaled sharply. It was a Hyuga. From the seal on its forehead, someone from the branch family. He moved from the body, and the small crowd that was in the room for he trial gasped and murmured at the obvious branch family member. This is highly suspicious, one of the elders who sat on the council exclaimed. He continued, how is it that a second branch family member would try another assassination? This is what I was warning you about, Hiyashi. It's an attempt for a coup d'état. I suggest an immediate lockdown of the branch family estate until an inquiry has been established. This brought an uproar from representatives of the main family household and the branch family estate alike. A lockdown was akin to prison sentence with maximum security conditions. Such unfounded allegations, another elder from the council exclaimed amid the clamor. Just like the main household to cast the blame on us. How do you not know it wasn't someone outside the estate? For what reason would someone outside the state have to meddle with the Hyuga, much less the main household? The first elder replied, Hiyashi, I implore you to sanction the lockdown. They cannot be trusted. Are you implying we're criminals? The other elder angrily asked. It has happened before. History often repeats itself. The elder shouted. Their banter ignited an even greater noise. Hinata slipped away ever so vaguely during their state of confusion. Hiyashi stood there while the small crowd bickered, tensions rising. If he didn't handle this correctly, he might very well have a coup d'état upon his hands. But honestly, 2 attempted assassinations, an air match, and now this tension between the families. How easier it would have been if Hazashi were alive. As the clamor grew louder and louder, it became increasingly difficult for Hiyashi to hear himself think. Silence. All of you. Or suffer ceiling. He yelled into the noise, using a bit of chakra to help project his voice. The crowd instantly quieted. Great. Kazama. Yes, Hiyashi-sama. The guard replied, eager to do something. Being the head of the guard, he was in a pretty hot shoe. Since he came in contact with the branch family more often than the main, he figured it'd be best to await an order instead of taking a personal action that might cast him and his guards in disfavor to either households. Hiyashi turned to him while taking off his robe and throwing it over the body. Alert the Anbu, have them send an examiner over for the body. Increase the patrol among the branch family estate, also, have someone see to the repairs of the room. He turned to the crowd. The council will break until there has been a general meeting on the affairs going on in the estate. All trials and previously scheduled meetings with the Grand Council will be temporarily on hold until further notice. All existing sentences are still in effect until stated otherwise. Any new situations that require a council trial will be held by your inclusive council in the estate you reside. Until further notice, these orders are effective immediately. You are dismissed. With hushed murmurs, everyone slowly filed out of the room while trying to get a proper glance at the body. When only Hiyashi remained, he summoned 2 guards to guard the room and the body, and gave them strict instructions to keep anyone unauthorized out. He then took himself off to his private quarters until the Anbu arrived. Something's amiss, Hanabi stated while escorting Naruto, or rather Otura-san, back to the entrance. How do you figure? Naruto asked, while glancing around. Surprisingly, after they left the secret room, they didn't run across anyone. Despite we stayed in that room past my trial time, no one has been looking for me. Hanabi replied, slowly dawning on her usually demeanor. She continued, I wonder what happened. She used her Byakugan while they walked, stretching her vision to see if anything unusual was happening. Naruto glanced at her and was tempted to grope her a bit, but decided it would look odd for an old woman to be inappropriately touching the air. He studied the little veins that appeared around her eyes while she peered about discreetly. This girl was growing on him. During their intimate moment in the little secret room, she shared with him her reason for her behavior, why she's the way she is. He found them to be similar in a sense. They were both lonely people. He grinned. They were also both attractive hormonal young people. The implications were endless. Thinking more of the room, they were quite different as well. Where his emotions showed on his face and lives in his words, hers are portrayed in her actions. The way she clung to his body, just showing the need for company, a desire to be seen other than a puppet. Her passionate kisses were sometimes fierce with anger, soft with sadness, gentle with empathy. The strong hands that held his head in place, that raked his back, that roamed his body, were just eager with excitement. The sounds, the scents. He thought, there was no denying they had some kind of bond on some level. Besides somewhat fulfilling a physical need for both of them, the short time in that room also brought an understanding between them. He wondered if she felt the same way. His desire for her company was only growing stronger. Heard me? Huh? Naruto shook his head to clear his thoughts. What were you asking? I asked what were you thinking? Hanabi replied. She was finding him to be oddly comforting. Oh dear, Naruto started, making sure to stay true to his disguise, you don't want to know. But I'll tell you anyway. This old woman had thoughts that reassure these old of mine, as well as replenish the water in this old well that has been dried for many centuries. The smallest of twitches appeared around the corners of Hanabi's lips. Really, for an old hag like you should retire from such thoughts. I doubt that dust factory of a body can even produce enough steam for moisture, much less a full drop of water for a well. Naruto chuckled. Such description. I was right, something is amiss. There's some clamor at the branch family estate. I wonder what happened. Hanabi stated, tilting her head ever so carefully to the right. Naruto looked around and only saw the decorated pathway that was leading to the main entrance to the Hyuga estate. Sure, there were buildings a bit in the distance around them, but there was nothing amiss he could see. Really? I don't see anything. How or why right? Fancy eyes you got there. He teased. I'd hope you weren't oogling my body. Hanabi made something akin to a snort. Like your grotesque body is something to look at. Please, we Hyugas have a strict code of moral honor about the use of our Byakugan. Though as she signed him out the estate, she casually mentioned, though sometimes duty dictates a call to forget about it, as it may. She gave the slightest tilt of her head in acknowledgement as Naruto walked away chuckling. When he was a good much away, The guard said, Hanabi-san, you should not be out. There was another assassination attempt. There is unsettling tension. It'd be best if you stayed within the main household. Hanabi thanked the guard, a relatively young one. Probably fresh from the academy, she supposed. And how he'd addressed her, she assumed he must have not heard much about her. He flustered a bit at her gratitude. Hanabi turned and ninja sped her way back to the main compound. She figured she'd bring herself up to speed about the assassination attempt. Reaching the compound, she covered herself in a servant's robe, as to avoid people, and headed towards her father's private quarters. Hinata sat in the common gardens, deep in thought. She had it all figured it out. Her plan was going to be flawless, but now there was only one slight hiccup. However, she could handle it, and in fact use it to her advantage. Yes, she thought while tapping her chin, she would no longer need her original plan. Whoever sent the assassins did her a favor. Until that situation was sorted out, the air match would be postponed indefinitely. However, if her father remained true to form, the inquiry would be performed as soon as possible, and in no time things will get back to normal. So her task now was to find some way to keep the tension up. As the person who killed the latest assassin, she dared not go into the Branch family at this moment. She leaned back a little and exhaled. Something bothering you? Hinata swiveled her head towards the voice and saw Neji standing there. She didn't even hear him approach. Neji-ni-san, when did you get here? She asked, smiling at him. Neji sat next to his mysterious cousin. A few moments ago. Are you here escaping the clamor as well? Hinata nodded. I assume all the elders will be looking for you now. Neji sighed. Thankfully Mame Haba-san scared them away for now. But truthfully, I've come to ask, how are you? You're not worried about yourself? Someone in the family has it out for you and Hanabi-san. Hinata shrugged. I'll be fine, I can hold my own, however I'm not too confident about Hanabi. She's been getting in all sorts of trouble with father lately. Neji smirked. Oh, I think she'll be just fine. She apparently has her own agenda from what I've heard. Though we should be careful, Hinata. I wonder what he knows on Hanabi, she thought. Maybe she was able to enlist Neji to aid her in her troubles. Why should we be careful? Shouldn't we watch out for Hanabi? Despite our issues, she really does worry me at times. Neji folded his arms and stated with cold confidence, I think it's someone from either the main household or the Branch household who's behind all of this. If you think about it, it's like we're being set up. Why would you say that? Hinata asked, a little bit cautious. She'll definitely have to choose what she says wisely, else he might catch on. With Hiyashi-sama's retirement approaching soon, an heir has to be named. Seems to me someone is trying to remove the current heirs so they can easily slide into the spot as clan leader. Neji whispered. Ears were everywhere, and with such tension in the estate, anything could be used as a weapon. The ambitious will use this tension to their own benefit, and he'd prefer if nothing he said would help them. Hinata pondered a bit on what Neji was saying. It was credible enough. If he was right, it would seem someone was entering into her game. I wonder. Neji-sama, Lord Hiyashi